anymore? Good stuff.
Lucky suckers. You think it's funny?
Welcome back to the show.
Change the conversation, win some games.
Your smooth jazz leader, FM 100.3 KFAN. It's the 9 to noon show. And a pleasant good morning to you. It's Paul Allen, Nordo by my side. Courtesy of TimberTech and TimberTech.com. What's on deck 9 to noon includes some cogent football conversation, including a sneak peek at this week, a sneak peek at some fresh meat with Raiders beat writer Tashawn Reed joining us at 11 o'clock. And the reasoning behind that is we generally don't put big previews from adversarial scribes on preseason games. But Tashawn had a story early in the week where it was revealed to me that Raiders coach Antonio Pierce plans to play his starters against the Minnesota Vikings on Saturday, U.S. Bank Stadium, 3 o'clock, FM 100.3 KFAN. So very curious to see what he has up his sleeve at about 11 o'clock. Also, a Covenant catch-up with former Vikings offensive lineman Jeremiah Searles. That takes place in the final hour. And a new friend joins the Covenant at 10 o'clock. His name is Cody Alexander. He has some fascinating football websites called Match Quarters and also Field Vision. And Justin Jefferson... we'll save it to 10 o'clock. Ain't going to step on my own touchdown call. But there are some things unveiled there with Mr. Alexander, a former high school football coach who's written 6 books that we really believe you will enjoy. That's 10 o'clock, courtesy of TimberTech and TimberTech.com. Let's start 9 to noon with a 3-time Super Bowl champion and author. His name is Michael Lombardi. I've known him for quite some time. Very affable man. At M Lombardi NFL via Twitter. And good morning, Michael. How are you?
I am great, Paul. How are you? I'm disappointed. We got no music, no Hall & Oates, no Springsteen, nothing to enter the show. It's so unlike you. You doing good?
Well, I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. It's the bureaucracy of music and radio and podcasting and opportunists. Well, that just should answer your question in a nutshell. You understand?
Thank you so much. Yes, I got you completely.
So the only John Bon Jovi, that you and or I will get today is atop your Twitter page when he got one of the 2 books you wrote, and he opened it, took a picture, and sent it to you. And that's really cool, man.
It's great. He's been a good friend. You know, he would come to our practices back in the early 90s in Cleveland because of his friendship with Coach Belichick. And I got to know him. I was offered to go with him on a European tour that my wife demanded I didn't go. So that was a hard break. But other than that, it's been great.
All right. Here, you and I have chatted on and off the radio many times. And here's one I never have asked you. Ready?
Yep.
While recruiting, Michael was the recruiting coordinator for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas football team, recruiting coordinator for UNLV. Did you recruit Randall Cunningham to that school? Because the years add up.
Yeah, well, I wish I did. I did not. I recruited Ickey Woods, but not Randall Cunningham. But Randall was on campus when we arrived, and it was remarkable. I've never saw in my lifetime, and haven't since, somebody punt the ball like Randall Cunningham. When he punted the ball the first time, I thought this is back in the early 80s, I thought, which was a popular TV show, The Bionic Man. Yeah. I thought The Bionic Man punted the ball. Yeah. And it was really remarkable. And so, yeah, he was there. And then we recruited Ickey Woods, George Tom. We had a bunch of guys end up playing football in the league. And frankly, it was one of the great experiences. When we had the strike in 87, we went 2-1 in Cleveland. And most of those players on our strike team came from the UNLV team.
Geez. And right. So was the Ickey Shuffle a thing at Boyd Stadium in Vegas before he got to Cincinnati?
No, it really wasn't. I mean, he just started to come along. He's from Fresno, California. We recruited him. I mean, it was really remarkable how he was a big, powerful back, and he got on campus. And, when he got that Ickey Shuffle going and that Cincinnati offense, I regretted it because I eventually ended up in Cleveland having to play against him.
And speaking of playing against players, it's when you were with the Raiders, all right, for nearly a decade, as I believe it was senior, you worked in the personnel department. We're going to get into that momentarily, senior personnel executive. But like right after you left UNLV, 84-ish, half a decade later or a little less, Keenan McCardell came to UNLV. So here's the common thread. He goes to UNLV. He's the wide receivers coach here. And your paths would cross in 2002 when after the 2002 season when he played in the Super Bowl for the Buccaneers against your Raiders.
Yeah, and Keenan's a special place in my heart because Keenan's a guy that back in the early 90s, we had this thing called Plan B. And Keenan had come out and he had Chris Carter-like hands. And I know your Viking audience here would understand what I'm talking about. Hands that are rare, not just good, rare, exceptional. Catch everything, one-handed, two-handed, off the fingertips. Keenan was that player coming out of college, and we signed him in Cleveland as a Plan B player. I think we gave him like $30,000 and signed him from Washington. He was on the Redskins then team as their practice squad player, and he came into Cleveland, and we kept bringing him up and down the roster, and finally he made our team. He was unbelievable how he caught the ball, and then we lost him in free agency. We let Tom Coughlin come in to watch practices before Jacksonville took over as the expansion, and the first player he signed was Keenan McCardell.
Yeah, that's and he's a wonderful wide receivers coach here, not only with Jefferson but Addison, and talked to KJ Osborne about him, who's now in New England. Now with UNLV, all right. What was Vegas like in the 80s compared to now?
No, it was a small town, and so everything was the most important person in Vegas then was the fire marshal, because he controlled all the arenas in the town, and he could close down if you couldn't get in. Joey D, the maitre d' over at the Aladdin, was one of my closest friends. His son was the kicker on our team, and so I was a young kid and got to go over to the Aladdin and watch Sammy Davis, watch Dean Martin, sit in the front row. It was a small town. I made no money, Paul. I mean, my first salary was $6,000 a year. My second salary went up to $9,000, but I had, I could eat on the strip. I could go to the casinos, and people would take care of you. When I go back now, my son was the offensive coordinator last year at the Raiders. He's now at San Francisco. I don't even recognize the town. My apartment was truly on the edge of town, and now that edge is relative to the middle of the town.
So what was the Aladdin is now Planet Hollywood, right?
Yeah, it was. And, and this was early. This was the transition from when the mob was really running Vegas to corporate America coming in and running Vegas. And it was an interesting time to see the Caesars Palace. We would bring recruits over to Caesars Palace on Sunday morning to watch, to have the brunch that was going on in there. We had fights out there. Larry Holmes fighting, I forget the name of the one boxer, Jerry Cooney.
Yeah.
It was Jerry Cooney.
Yeah.
And, we had all the kids do that. So it was a great atmosphere. Jerry Tarkanian's basketball team was really coming to play. They had just built Thomas and Mack at that time, the arena. They were playing in the convention center over by the Las Vegas Hilton at that time. So it was a really small town. Everybody kind of knew one another. And once you got off the strip, it was really like any other town. Now it's so big, it's enormous. Summerlin was just an idea back then.
In closing here, the Stardust. I used to walk in there 35 years ago when I was like 22, 23, and would look around for the Rat Pack. It just had that kind of feel, the Stardust. Remember that spot?
Oh, of course I do. And I did the same thing at the Aladdin, and seeing and going backstage. I shook Sammy Davis's hand. I mean, it was really a powerful thing. And those rooms, and and you went to the old Sands when they played, when the Rat Pack played there as well. You could feel the vibe in that. You go to Cal Neva up in Reno where they played there too. You could almost hear them speaking to you. It was really a magical place, and it still is to a degree. I still go to Vegas because of Base and Stats and Information Network. I work there. Downtown Circa was where our studios are based. It's fun to look around there. And I got to tell you, if you ever go to Vegas, the greatest thing you could do in Vegas is go to the Mob Museum. The Mob Museum in downtown Vegas is the best tourist attraction in the city.
I've been, and it's about 3 hours if you do it right, wouldn't you say?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You cannot go and then you can sit down there at the speakeasy and have yourself a drink.
Now, Raiders, all right? Now, the Vikings hooked the Raiders in the first preseason game, and reports are that Raiders coach Antonio Pierce is playing a starter Saturday. All right, now, Devontae Adams isn't with the team as he awaits the birth of his third child. But I mean, Crosby and Wilkins and his frontline players. Now they don't have joint practices, okay? But he's going to play a lot of his ones this weekend. Are you a fan of that with 3 preseason games these days?
Well, I think you have to play your offensive line, and I think each situation is different, right? Bill Parcells taught me this early in my lifetime when I was fortunate enough to spend time around him. I never worked for him, but I was around him quite a bit. And he often said to me, offensive lines are like boxers. If you don't spar them, they're not going to be ready for the fight. And so I do think you have to play your lineman. Andy Reid. Now, I don't think you have to go overboard. Like, I don't think Max Crosby or Christian Wilkins needs to play very much. But Wilson, the defensive lineman they drafted from Texas Tech last year, should play. Kuntz should play a little bit, in the first quarter. I think there's a gradual progression. I think pad level is so important at opening games. I think you got to be physical at opening games. I think you can wear people down. The other part about opening games, Minnesota goes into New York. We know the New York heat and humidity could be a factor. You got to spar a little bit to be able to get to play 70 plays if that's what it requires opening day in the game. So I am to a degree. I don't think all the baseball caps works. Look, let's face it, the Cincinnati Bengals the last two seasons are 0-4 in the first two games of the year with Joe Burrow because they don't do anything at training camp, and it takes them the month of September to get going.
Michael Lombardi at M. Lombardi NFL. Learn about his books, learn about the podcasts he does, the daily messages and things like that. It's a fascinating site at M. Lombardi NFL. Better receiver and why? Davante Adams or Justin Jefferson?
Well, I think there's a huge gap now, Paul. Davante had his day. I think his day is kind of slowly evolving. He's not as explosive as he once was. Father Time is winning. I think Jefferson has that one-step explosiveness. He can burst at the top of the route. I think if you really pay attention to Davante last year, he was always covered. He wasn't really had separation. And it's one of the things when you take an older receiver is you worry about when does that juice, when does that ability to win at the top of the route go away. And I think it's slowly evading here. I think Davante Adams, in talking to a lot of people that interviewed for the GM job, they mentioned perhaps trading him if they got that GM job, because I think he's at the point where he could still offer something to a team. There's no question. But his ability to be a number one receiver, to require double teams all the time, no. Now, Jefferson, he does.
The Vikings get Cleveland next week after a couple of joints out there, Michael. And the Browns season win total is 8.5. The over is -140. Do you think they get 9 or more? And yes, I know the division is super tough.
I think it's really hard. Look, their quarterback hasn't played anywhere near what they paid for. Let's be clear, right? I mean, it just hasn't happened. And their numbers last year on the road defensively have not been good. But let's stay with Deshaun Watson. He's averaged 6.5 yards per attempt in his career in Cleveland, 14 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. You know, when they signed him to this huge deal, he was coming off of a time where he was at his success rate throwing the ball was 54.5. Now it's down to 38.3.
Jeez.
Just think about this, Paul. Last year, Joe Flacco in 5 games threw for 1,616 yards. Watson in 6 games threw for 1,115 yards. So there's a huge gap. And their defense really is somewhat confusing for me. And here's why. They were the worst red zone defense in the National Football League last year. The worst. Not 20th, the worst, the 32nd. But they were the best third down defense in the league. Like, those two things don't make sense. Usually if you get off the field, you can get out of the field in third down in the red zone. So I think there's a lot of questions about this team. And it starts with the quarterback. Look, it starts there. And I think losing Bill Callahan to the Tennessee Titans as their offensive line coach, that becomes a problem because last year, when you watch their team, their offensive line really did not stay healthy. And so it was really behooving on Callahan to get some of these young players to play well, and he did. And he really did. Now, can that happen again? You know, that remains to be seen. Jedrick Willis is still on IR. He's on PUP. Conklin, their two starting right and left tackles are on IR. Can Jones and Hudson, who play behind them, play as well as they did last year without Callahan? I wonder.
Now, Michael, at M. Lombardi NFL, we see something called Daily Coach. The most recent submission is being boring wins and never goes out of style. What's that?
Well, it's a lot about what high achievers do, what we write about. First of all, the Daily Coach is an important email for anybody who wants to improve their leadership ability. We send an email out 7 days a week. It's free. And what we try to do is stir a conversation within your own mind to how can you become a better leader. Well, everybody's a leader. You lead yourself, you lead your family, you lead other people around you, your friends, or you work in a company that you lead people. And so this email message from the great George Radling, the former head coach at Iowa, Washington State, and USC, he and I started the company years ago, and we just sent out this email. Today's email was about being boring. And being boring is what all great achievers are. They do the same thing consistency. Because at the end of the day, Paul, consistency is more important. You know, intensity impresses, consistency transforms. And that's what this message is about today. Jerry Seinfeld consistently wrote jokes every single day. Buzz Williams, the great basketball coach at Texas A&M, his calendar is as consistent as can be. What we're trying to do is be boring, is you have to embrace consistency.
Now, okay, off that, how do great leaders elevate the standard of excellence around them?
Well, they start with themselves, but I think they challenge people. I think that's the thing. There's no bar, right? If you're Kevin O'Connell and you went to the playoffs next year, you start all over again, and you've got to challenge everybody to come into the building and not talk about Super Bowls, not talk about winning the NFC North, talk about how are we going to get better today? What do we have to do to get better? And understand the competition. Who do we have to beat today to win? We have to win ourselves, and then we have to defeat the opponent. One of the things that bothered me so much about Hard Knocks this year, I never heard the New York Football Giants haul their personnel department ever say, how are we going to beat Philly? How are we going to beat Dallas? Now, they haven't beaten those teams in 10 years. They have a 36% win percentage since Tom Coughlin left in 2014. So how are they going to win? You have to talk about that. What do we have to do to get better every single day? That's what great teams do, and they stay together. There's going to be highs and lows, but you've got to work on focusing on the process of what you use to be able to achieve it. Great teams have camaraderie to them. It's not always about the most talented team. It's the team that stays together.
That's beautiful. Well stated. Couple more here for Michael Lombardi. What do you think of the Ravens with Derrick Henry back there with Lamar Jackson?
I really like it. On my podcast today, we're going to talk about blue chip running backs. Henry is still a blue chip runner. Top 5 in the league is what we call blue chips. What I think is interesting about this decision, Paul, is that they're going to be more under center or more in the pistol. See, I do not think Lamar Jackson's a great shotgun quarterback. I think the RPO game in the National Football League is really going way down. Look at Jalen Hurts' numbers last year. The only guy who has had a very good experience in the RPO game has been Tua. Now, Tua averaged 5.5 of RPOs 2 years ago. Last year, he averaged 6.1. But those numbers are dwindling down. And so the RPO game, people are defending better. I think Lamar is better as a play-action pass quarterback. And play-action pass really becomes more important when you're under center. Let's just take the Houston Texans, for example. Right? No team in the National Football League made more explosive plays. But Houston was 21st in rushing attempts last year. They were 31st in rushing first downs per game, and they ranked 31st in rushing yards per percentage of their offense. They couldn't run the ball, but yet they kept faking runs, and they got big explosive plays down the field. The play-action pass matters. And so I think when you have a guy like Henry, and he's in that deep eye with Lamar under center or in the pistol, the defense is going to react, and that's going to make the game easier for Lamar.
Okay, as running backs go, so Sam Darnold is for all intents and purposes now, he's the one. And let's say he starts at the New York Giants. Aaron Jones is the tailback. So with Darnold and Jones, then Jefferson and Addison behind a good offensive line, what kind of damage can you do with that?
Well, I think Jones is the key. I think if you really study Green Bay down the stretch, and I know Jordan Love gets a lot of love, and he certainly played well, but I think the emergence of Aaron Jones on that team down the stretch was a huge difference. Because here's what you have to understand as football fans. The back makes the spread. If the back is multidimensional, and Aaron Jones is, where he can make plays in the passing game like McCaffrey and still run the ball inside or outside, that becomes a whole different element for the defense. But what happens is when you put a back on the field that can only run, people yell, run, run, run. When you put a back on the field that's just good in protection or run the ball outside, people are yelling, screen, screen. And so it really hinders it helps the defense to know who the back is. And I think Aaron Jones, it's hard to get a read on. And I think they will be very effective. The thing for Sam Darnold is to play within himself. And I think Kevin will do a really good job with that. He doesn't have to be a hero. The Giants are going to play a very vanilla front defensively. They're going to play a very vanilla coverage. You got to take the profits against them. They're not going to be blitzing like they were 2 years ago when you played them in a playoff game. They're going to be a vanilla defense. You got to block them and you got to take the profits. And I think if Darnold does that, look, this job's going to come down to Darnold's ability to protect the football. Because one thing about Brian Flores' defense, he's going to get after the quarterback. He's going to make it hard for Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is not good at making decisions. 30% blitz rate last year against opponents. He struggles when people come after him. And I think Brian will do a good job there. So in that opening game, it's a little bit of, you can't lose the game offensively. We've got to take the profits.
All right, last one, and really appreciate the time. Awesome commentary, Michael, as usual. Why is Dallas jacking around with CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, and Dak Prescott? Because the money is on the minds of those players.
Yeah, look, I've never understood this substitute teacher thing. In 2002, we went to the Super Bowl. Bill Callahan was the head coach, and he had a 4-year contract, but but the last 2 years of that contract, Al Davis was the player, the club had the right. The club had to exercise the option for the final 2 years. What happened then was we lost the Super Bowl, and we didn't exercise the option. And so Bill Callahan was a lame duck coach. And whenever you become a lame duck coach and you have a losing streak, you become a substitute teacher. You lose the classroom. And I don't understand where Jerry's coming from. Every deal at receiver is on the table. Now, look, I think Brandon Ayuk is probably being really ridiculous. DJ Moore got $27.4 million per year. He wants $30. He's not a better player than DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk. It is. Now, you could say give him the money, but once you do that, you lose a competitive advantage in the salary cap and on the field. So I don't know what CeeDee Lamb wants. I don't understand it. I know that Dak Prescott makes $29 million this year. They could easily redo his deal and lower his cap number. But I don't understand what they're doing. It almost seems like they're going to forego this year for next year, which I don't understand it with a lame duck head coach.
You're my main man. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch up soon, okay?
Anytime, Paul. Thank you so much. All the best.
Yep, you too. Appreciate you. That's a 3-time Super Bowl winner, working in personnel departments for teams around the NFL. It's Michael Lombardi at MLombardi NFL. Give him a follow, as 9 to noon does. I'm Paul Allen. Welcome to FM 100.3 KFAN and the 9 to noon production. Vikes Bites are next.
The Fan. Vikes Bites!
Vikes Bites.
Vikes Bites is brought to you by Thousand Hills Lifetime Grazed Grass-Fed Beef. Go to thousandhillslifetimegrazed.com. It's a Clearwater, Minnesota company. It's local. Matt and the people there are unbelievable, and it's a great product, too. You can buy it online. It shows up at your doorstep. Local co-ops, local Coburns locations. They support local athletes, staying local as well. So, love you, Thousand Hills. Love me some Garrett Bradbury. 2019 first-round draft pick. I saw this from a Star Tribune article, PA, and this is from, let me see here. It was talking about supplements that he's been using. He's a little farther along in his career. He's got to stay up on things. And Dalton Reisner apparently has been giving him some guff about his regimen. And Bradbury says, Dalton's never taken a supplement in his life, while O'Neill and I are on a pretty regimented schedule of what to eat, what supplements to take, and when. So Dalton was asking about what we were taking. I showed him this supplement that it takes electrolytes and minerals from seawater, and now Dalton's called it the Indian Ocean saltwater diet. There's another year after 2024 left on Mr. Bradbury's deal. We have spent, and rightly so, a ton of time focusing on Blake Brandel and Dalton Reisner mentioned here. He's going to be in the mix potentially at Ingram year 3. Let's see that big jump, whatever that entails. Ultimately, Garrett Bradbury, the man in the middle, what do we think about him? It's kind of there's some consistency there, some continuity there. I know everybody on the line loves him, including whether it was Kirk Cousins. Now we got a couple of new faces under center. But Garrett Bradbury's lot in life at this stage of his career, you've mentioned Juergens and some other names in terms of probably people we'll see playing on Saturday, but Garrett Bradbury, he's still here. He's still our starting center, PA.
Well, first, I'm into the salt on French fries diet or salt on Indian food diet, preferably when I'm next to an ocean.
With a side of cupcakes?
Absolutely. When it's not akin to the type of diets Bradbury and or O'Neill have discussed. There are a lot of good things you can do in an offense like this with Garrett Bradbury. Now, with Blake Brandel playing left guard and assumedly starting when the season begins, and Ingram is of the bigger variety, it's abundantly clear they are looking to get bigger inside. The question would be, what's the long form reasoning? Because we can say, what I've said for years is how are you going to move Akeem Hicks? How are you going to move Eddie Goldman? How are you going to move Kenny Clark? All that kind of stuff. Well, that's obvious, but there's more to it. And specifically with Aaron Jones as the tailback, with what they want to do between tackles. So Bradbury's lot in life always has been underrated. There are wonderful things you can do in space with a super athletic center like Garrett Bradbury, and quite honestly, I'm happy he's the starting center.
I've always wondered, as an outsider, when we're trying to analyze Ed Ingram, how much Brian O'Neill plays into that. How much then on the other side, Garrett Bradbury plays into that. You've talked about, ultimately, at this stage of his career, you're going to get what you've gotten from Garrett Bradbury. Maybe there's not another gear or growth step at this stage for Garrett. But as you mentioned, tons of good things you can do with him. At times, 1v1 versus the Kenny Clarks of the world. Just about every center in the league is going to lose some of those battles. He's lost his fair share of those. Mm-hmm. But I just wonder,
how many offensive coordinators have the Vikings had, and they've stuck with Garrett Bradbury?
Yeah. And that's a sign to said consistency.
Right.
Combined with the fact that you're getting him to re-up on a deal that was very financially flexible in exchange versus, are you going to go deep into the draft? How much do you want this new center? So I'm not saying he hasn't proved himself. I'm just curious, kind of extending beyond that, whether it's Ed Ingram or it's Blake Brandel, how much does the play of the center, when you're talking about size and you're talking about moving man forward and what they want on the interior of that line, if I'm analyzing Blake Brandel, how much does it matter that the guy playing next to him? What does he play into that?
Great question. And I'm bringing up Garrett Bradbury with Jeremiah Searles in the final segment. Jeremiah, 6-year offensive lineman in the NFL, played for the Minnesota Vikings. That's an extension. That'll be an extension to a question I already have for him about Bradbury. Good idea.
Vikes Bites! At this stage of camp, and this year might be unique given the injuries, given the situation at secondary, but even into the first preseason game, PA, how close do you think the team is to setting their 53? If they had to, even before kickoff on Saturday, we know a lot of the names. We probably know most of the names, but I'm always fascinated as you have a league that's trying to evolve into fewer preseason games, more regular season games, fewer physical practices, and taking some of the reps off in the offseason for players. Ultimately, there's an arbitrary and ceremonial nature. There is that aspect of it to preseason and maybe even camp. How close to the final 53 do you think that Kevin O'Connell and company are as we talk right now?
Excellent question, because I've just learned over the years is I think now with the preseason game this weekend, and the Raiders, according to reports, playing their ones. So now it's something into which we just kind of passed over a little bit, but talked it out a tiny bit, is, okay, well, what's the response going to be here? So it's like if you have Darisaw and for parts you have Reisner, all right, or you have Brandel and Ingram. If they're going to run Max Crosby, John Jenkins, and Christian Wilkins at you for a full quarter, well, if you're not going to use the best players that you have on the offensive line, then it changes the approach to offense, which means I'm not going to say it's a hoist the white flag, get out alive bit, but if I have backup offensive linemen playing against Crosby, well, I ain't going on 7-step drops. So quick game and just the quick passing aspect definitely will be in play if that's the case. So I think it's more about the elevation of those who will be on the 53 from being, okay, you're going to be on the practice squad. You're going to get that 100 piece. You're going to get the comp meals and the per diem on the road, and you're in the mix. So you're practicing with the best of the best. So that's good. That's a W. But if you want to get from the practice squad to consistently on the active roster, you got to beat that guy. And now's the time to beat that guy. With the preseason game where you're going to play a lot, the joint practices where you will not get as much run as you will in some of these games. And that's when you, as they would say, show out. And, it's the cornerback situation. It's a major talker. It's an A-topic talker. But there just aren't, there is not, in my estimation, the depth. When you get past undrafted Dwight McGlothern, I believe he's second-year guy from Indiana, Jalen Williams, and maybe one other, along with those who absolutely will make it, it kind of stops there. Now, in these games and the joint practices and the practices, the wide receiver situation is very compelling to me because Jefferson gets a spot, the fan has learned. Addison gets a spot. Brandon Powell gets a spot. Is it because of his punt returning and or potential kick returning style and skill set, or is it because he truly is the third best receiver on your team? And then after that, it becomes a little bit of a hodgepodge. Trent Sherfield Jr. was signed to a 2-year deal. So they could have given him a 1. Maybe he wouldn't have taken it. In fact, there were other teams, I would imagine, after Trent. So that probably was the separator. We'll give you 2. It ain't going to be that much, but you get this. So I'd predict Sherfield Jr., because of his special teams prowess, and if and or when he does play, he can be a high-end run-blocking wide receiver. I'm just going to put him in the mix, but not at 100%. Now, there's a Ja'Shawn Jones who is opening. He's undrafted from Maryland, and he's opening the right eyes. And he's going to play a fair amount this weekend. Thayer Thomas is somebody they've liked for a year and change. Thayer's a tough kid who you can use in the return game, and he mixes it up with anybody on the field. So getting not only the 53 established, where I'd say they probably could set it now if they had to, but earning a right to not just be on the practice squad, but be somebody who wins their way to the active roster. That's what's happening now.
Final Vike Bite for you here, and then I actually have some more and some McCarthy morsels around the corner. Thank you, Thousand Hills. Justin Jefferson, a different kind of JJ, is going to be mic'd up with you during the third quarter during Saturday's game. How cool is that going to be, having kind of that unfiltered access? You've had Kwesi in the booth. For years it was Rick Spielman, but having JJ being able to holler and get in his ear, maybe a dump button or two. I'm not sure yet. But JJ on Saturday, that's pretty sweet, right?
Yeah, it's unprecedented. I mean, not just here, but in talking to some fellow Voxes around the league via text yesterday, nobody knows of anybody doing this. Specifically, like teams have done it in the preseason, maybe for, what's going to be a series. All right, Devontae, you're going to join so-and-so for this series in the third quarter. Well, if they go 3 and out, that's it for Devontae. He ain't waiting through a break. Well, Justin's going to be with us the entire third quarter. So crafting the questions and thinking that out a little bit before I get with Bursage and Lieber on just exactly how we're going to execute it. It's amazingly fun because I've never done anything like this. I've never written anything like this. So, when do you slide in? What'd you think of receiver? I mean, you were prominently placed in it. Talking about the receivers we just mentioned, Ja'Shawn Jones, Thayer Thomas, whomever is in the game at that time, the routes they're running, and the defense they're seeing. Another layer of it is you get doubled and tripled all the time. All right, so that undoubtedly becomes very frustrating. But like when you get to the line and you got a cat 5 yards away from you and you see the safety maybe single high, middle of the field, shading to his right, do you think, okay, this could be single coverage? And if so, how do you get the message to the quarterback? It's going to be unbelievable. Third quarter, Saturday, KFAN, Fox 9, and NFL Network. Justin Jefferson on a microphone with yours truly, Pete Bursage and Ben Lieber, for the entire third quarter. I mean, Vikings PR made a play of all plays ever to play with this play. So thank you for that. Those are Vikes Bites. 9 to noon continues after this. Josh Allen and the ones for the Buffalo Bills are playing and may be playing extensively this weekend. In their first preseason game, they'll take on the Chicago Bears. They'll be playing their second preseason game, having played in the HOF game. And word from Eberflus in Chicago is that Caleb Williams and his ones, maybe this side of Keenan Allen, they're going to play in the game. So it's interesting that we have, into this Vikings-Raiders game this weekend where our 11 a.m. guest, Tashawn Reed, who covers the Raiders for The Athletic, he had an interesting nugget in his story that I was reading Monday, getting ready for the adversary, where Antonio Pierce said, not only are we going to split reps with our quarterbacks, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, because they have no idea who their starter is going to be week one. One's going to get a quarter, and the other's going to get a quarter. So it behooves yours truly to ask the scribe, well, does that mean their first offense will be playing with both? Like, how are they going to do that? So I think the Raiders are going to unfurl a bunch of ones, a fair amount of starters, for a majority of the first half this weekend. Now, Buffalo, with what they're looking to do, that could be the case. Maybe with Chicago, too, which is antithetical to the McVay way, where Sean McVay, he just plays none of his starters ever in the preseason, but there's definitely a change with the mindset of a lot of teams around the NFL, specifically those like, say, the Vikings, where they have a new quarterback. They have, no matter who it is, they have a new quarterback. They have a new tailback who's going to play a lot. They have tight ends who, aren't TJ Hawkinson. Granted, they've had him the entire offseason, but still, that's Hawkinson's money when he's healthy. They're going to have a new left guard. Defensively, a bunch of new players all over the place. So I think it leads into a cool conversation of protecting what matters most when the games count, as opposed to finding game speed continuity between what is new during the course of these preseason games. And it's abundantly clear there's a shift to a certain extent taking place around the NFL when it comes to playing these ones.
Vikes Bites last segment. Thank you to Thousand Hills and some McCarthy morsels momentarily. Right. But I did want to hit you with this, and it's not about trying to catch you off guard or anything. So, but roll with me. My opinion and my perception of something is not the gospel. There's no doubt about it. But over the course of training camp, PA, the shows I've done out there, the people that I've gotten the chance to talk to, and I haven't been out there as much as you have, there's a different aura to camp. There is a different energy to camp in 2024. And there is specifically an amount of optimism around not only the aforementioned McCarthy and said morsels coming your way, but also Sam Darnold. So is there potentially addition by subtraction as it pertains to Kirk moving on and new opportunities abound at the quarterback position for the Minnesota Vikings? Well,
from your perception or standpoint, define a different aura or different feel.
Well, people that I've spoken to and the way that I've watched it, the energy is through the roof, the level of excitement around the offense.
Yes.
And potentially there's an aspect of that. I mean, Aaron Jones in the mix, a lot of equity there with Aaron Jones, but specifically around the quarterbacks.
Yep.
Last couple of years, and it's not in, I'm trying not to make this an indictment of Kirk per se, but it was, we're going to go to work. Kirk's our guy, and we're going to roll the ball out and see where things fall. This time around, you're hearing a giddiness to what's next, a giddiness to potentially what's new, and an excitement around what's different. And that, from my standpoint, has led to my perception of saying, ultimately right now, Kirk's the better quarterback of the three, so that's not part of the conversation. But there's an element of optimism around this team in the long play that I have seen that I think is spectacular and one of my favorite parts of camp.
I think it's a very keen observation because joy has reigned supreme during this camp. And let's not forget that this team was going week after week after week facing distraction. Sadly, the death of Kyrie Jackson and the two others, God rest their soul. Mekhi Blackmon rips up his ACL. Addison and that situation, I mean, they were just taking hit after hit. Well, it's calmed and it's stabilized. Like yesterday at practice, and maybe this has happened before, but I haven't seen it. You had 3 offensive linemen. Walter Rouse was one of them, and 2 others, and 4 of them actually. Well, they stood in front of the bleachers that would face north, so it looks at all the practice fields, just packed yesterday. And they had a choreographed bit where, like, they turned left, stopped, turned right to the center, stopped, turned right, stopped, came back, and it was on beat with the music that was playing. And then they started a skull chant, but it was orchestrated. It was choreographed. And I thought that was really, really cool, and the fans absolutely loved it. Then they ran out to practice. I mean, it's like, is that the difference between 14-3 and 3-14? No, but it plays exactly into what you're saying. There's just a joy and a happiness that should be there when this is the profession you have and you're at this level, and it's fun. I mean, it's the kids' game. It's a sport. It's what you've always wanted to do, and there's a lot of money that can be tied to it. So the happiness is what you said is absolutely a common thread. But really, going back to the first training camp that I witnessed with Kevin O'Connell, I don't know if this is a directive or if it's just who they are, but the days of the coaches screaming at the top of their lungs at a player in front of their teammates, in front of other coaches, in front of the media, and in front of the fans, that ain't happening here.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying, and you know what? That's right. And that's not like, you know, post-pandemic, everything's gotten soft and Sally this and you're just softness that. That ain't it. Nobody wants to be yelled at in the first place. Okay, sometimes raising the voice is required. But does it have to be in front of your cohorts, the coaches, the media, and the players? I think the directive absolutely is no. It doesn't. And it doesn't happen. Yet they still coach and teach and admonish and praise. It just is not for everybody to see. So that common thread is one I'm absolutely a fan of and have been since O'Connell got here. Just the way they handle their business out there, it's all business. It's very professional. And they get their points across, but it may be an eye-to-eye, in my case, eyebrow-to-eyebrows conversation, but they'll get their point across to somebody individually. There don't have to be histrionics. There do not need to be arms flailing, and you don't need to yell from 30 yards away. I'm a fan of that.
Let me give you, or the listeners, one little mini McCarthy morsel, because I know we got Cody. We're excited to talk to Cody Alexander next segment.
We got that 11:20 if you got more.
Well, and we also have during NDN coming up, final stretch of the 11 or 10 a.m. hour. But I'll get you some more morsels. But here's McCarthy talking about playing in front of fans on Saturday.
No matter what, playing in U.S. Bank, there's always going to be sizzle. You know, just hearing about it, just feeling the energy of this fan base. I know that it's going to be a live audience and a live environment, and I just can't wait to go out there with the boys and put on display what we've been doing, you know, since April. Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Bring the noise, Vikings fan. I've received several.
I'm so excited to watch him play.
Oh, hell yeah. Several text messages this week from some buddies like, Nordo, training camp practice is sold out. Can you help me out with some tickets? I have no access to tickets, and I'm sorry. Get a ticket to the preseason game on Saturday. Yeah. And watch JJ and the extended run that I'm believing that he's going to get in front of the home fans. Mm-hmm. But it was a good presser yesterday. Some insightful thinking and thoughts. Okay, how about I think? How about I offer some thoughts? Some insightful
All right, 3-2.
Insightful statements from the rookie that I'm going to dig into either News to Nord or sometime during the 11 o'clock hour. Excited to talk about JJ, excited to see JJ on Saturday.
And excited for that, but also excited to meet a new guest, 9 to noon. His name is Cody Alexander via Twitter at @the_coach_A. He's the owner of something called Match Quarters and the head of football ops at Field Vision. And I learned of him first in an Alec Lewis story where Caleb Evans spent a fair amount of his offseason watching defensive films of Caleb Evans with Cody Alexander. And the team knew about it and didn't have a problem with it. And also, in reading up on his website, it's hardcore metrics here, so you got to figure out what all the numbers and letters mean and everything, like the arrows and stuff. But it looks fascinating. So I want to learn about it. I want to meet the guy, and hopefully you enjoy him. A hardcore football conversation coming up around the corner at KFAN.